Welcome to the Inner Space Covent Garden talk. Our talk today is Believe in Yourself and how to do it. Whom amongst us hasn't experienced self-doubt and uncertainty? But I think we've also all experienced at some point that experience of believing in yourself, that you can do and be whatever you choose. But can we be that even when no one else believes we can? Or even when it feels like everything is going against us? What you believe is powerful. Believe you can't, and you most likely won't. Believe in yourself. Shift from self-doubt to self-empowerment. And in turn, you'll be able to turn adversary into advantage. You'll be able to pursue your dreams, your goals, your happiness. We've asked our speaker to share her insights on how to stop underestimating ourselves and shortchanging ourselves, but also strategies on how to believe in oneself. Belinda Westcott is currently based in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, and it's from there that she helps coordinate the Brahma Kumari's activities nationally. Belinda's going to be sharing her insights for around 40 minutes, and after that, she'll do a short guided meditation. The idea of the meditation is to allow what you've heard to become something that touches your heart and becomes an experience. So it becomes a tool you can use in your life from tomorrow. After that, she'll be taking your questions. So please send in your questions via the question and answer link or through the chat. And it will be my absolute pleasure to put those questions to Belinda on your behalf. Belinda, welcome, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Artie, and it's lovely to be with you all this evening. And I think we all agree that perhaps today, in today's world, believing in yourself is even more important and valuable. I was just thinking about my life, actually, and asking myself, have I always believed in myself? And I remember as a child being so painfully shy and definitely lacking in self-belief and confidence. And it's not a nice feeling at all. In fact, I think I spent most of my childhood being afraid of different things. The shyness is a fear of attention, a fear of people's focus on you, and all of that because there just wasn't that inner confidence. And I can see how over different time periods in my life, sometimes there was a better sense of self and sometimes not. And it definitely has a great impact on your happiness, your contentment, and your general enjoyment of your life. If there isn't that self-belief, there is such a feeling of insecurity. So you're never quite sure when you're going to be exposed in some way. Often you don't feel good enough or that you are enough. And I think that life experiences, they tip us one way or the other. Sometimes we sense that we failed in something, and that can cause our belief in ourselves to drop or even to disappear completely. I think society tends to emphasize that you have to be successful in order to be good enough. And life is really showing us today that to be comfortable with ourselves is much more important than for other people to be satisfied with us. And I have a slogan for myself, and that is, if it's good for me, it will be good for everyone. And that's a very different approach to how I was previously, where either I was trying to people please or perhaps take my sense of self from doing things for other people. And I've had a couple of experiences in my life that have helped me to actually shift that. And one of those experiences was when I was diagnosed with cancer, which is now many years ago. And I came through that experience, but the realization that I had after the cancer was that I needed to make some very big changes because I had identified patterns within myself that I felt were extremely unhealthy. And I felt that if I didn't make those changes, that possibly that cancer would come back. So I had a very powerful motivation to make those changes. But change is uncomfortable, not only for you, but for other people as well. And often others will resist your endeavors to bring about change for yourself. So it requires courage. And courage comes from a good sense of or belief in yourself. And so I had to find ways in which to reassure myself and also strengthen myself internally so that I would have the belief that I could bring about the changes that I needed to bring about. So one of the things that believing in the self does for one is that it helps one to overcome obstacles. And I think we all agree that in today's world, daily we are faced with obstacles in different ways, relationships, perhaps financially, and also with our inner world. Our happiness is so important, and yet it seems that many things take away our happiness. And so these obstacles that we face just become so much easier, so much lighter when there is that self-belief. Self-belief, if we take it down to its sort of essence, I feel is actually inner power. And we know that the mind is extremely powerful. And So whatever is happening in the mind, which includes our attitude, and belief in the self is a very powerful attitude. And it doesn't just happen by itself. You know, I think it's one of those things easier said than done. We have to put some things into practice in order to develop this self-belief, if it is not there. And sometimes people confuse self-belief with arrogance, and it is very different. Self-belief is this positive attitude towards yourself that you're enough, irrespective of your skills and your talents, but you as a human being are enough. And being able to approach your life with that very positive attitude towards yourself is the power that will take you through those obstacles and bring you out on the other side with that sense of confidence, achievement, and etc. So another memory that came back to me when thinking about this topic was when I was going for my very first job interview, and that is many years ago. I remember one thing my mother said to me. She said, remember, they will value you at what you value yourself. And those words were etched into my consciousness, and I've never forgotten them. And of course, we've all experienced that when we lack confidence or we can't believe in ourselves, we tend to get that from others, from life. It kind of has it reflects back to us. But the opposite is true, that when we do believe in ourselves and we have that self-confidence, that life brings the things that are going to help us to grow, to learn, to develop. So there are a couple of things, very practical things that we can do to increase our belief in ourselves. Because it's not a stagnant thing. It's not that you either believe in yourself or you don't. Things happen in our lives that sometimes undermine that self-belief. And so there's some practical things that we can do to strengthen that inner belief, so that even when the challenges do come from the outside, that actually we're able to weather that storm and to stay true to that self-belief. The first thing is, and I'm sure that many of you have noticed this, is to check your inner dialogue. How do you talk to yourself? What is the quality of that inner conversation? Because that's going to show us a lot about self-belief. If I tend to put myself down, remind myself of past failures, say things like, oh, you've messed up again. Oh, don't you ever get it right? When are you going to learn? This is the kind of inner dialogue that it shows us a lack of self-trust and faith in the self, but it also continues to undermine our efforts to improve that trust in the self. So once we are aware of that inner dialogue, we can start to change it and start to make a promise to the self that I am not going to undermine myself anymore. Sometimes it's a deep habit, and we can't always break habits overnight. But how do you break a habit? You break it by diminishing the amount of time that you spend emphasizing that habit. So try to be aware of that inner dialogue and slowly but surely start to change that conversation. And one of the things that we can do is to acknowledge our successes. You know, we're very quick to acknowledge the success of others. And sometimes we wait for some, to achieve some great goal or, something we have set ourselves to do before we acknowledge our success. But actually, we're able to change our self-belief with the acknowledgement of the small things. If you notice that, for example, your inner dialogue is becoming more positive, it's so important to acknowledge it, to pat yourself on the back, to say, well done. And, sometimes in our relationships, there are certain people that trigger our lack of self-belief. And one of the reasons for that is because we compare ourselves to others. So sometimes when we're in the company of someone we perceive to be more successful than ourselves, very often we will have a drop in that belief in the self. It's so unhealthy to compare ourselves to other people, which is different to being inspired by other people. Being inspired by other people is very positive. But if we are comparing ourselves to others, invariably, we will always find ourselves short, that we are not as successful, or we're not as skilled or as talented or as eloquent, whatever it is. If you have that habit of comparing yourself to others, I really strongly recommend that you try to stop that. So these are just some tips that you can start working on. At least become aware if you are comparing yourself to others, because that can be very undermining for this belief in the self. Because remember that your belief in yourself is directly connected to your self-confidence. And, we know that if we're not confident, everyone around us is aware of that. Think about someone in your life who lacks confidence. In your relationship with them, that is something that they do, that they don't have confidence. So developing belief in the self is absolutely essential. We've got so many amazing examples in the world of people against all odds being able to achieve the most extraordinary things because they never gave up on themselves. And earlier on, I mentioned Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison, and he comes out as a leader. He didn't come out and then become a leader. He came out of prison a leader of his nation. And from the moment he was freed from prison, it was very clear to everyone that this was a man of humility, but also a man who believed in himself. And he was able to transform this country in the most extraordinary way. I say transform the country, but the people of the country. So we have lots of examples of people who had to endure and go through enormous challenges, but because of that self-belief, they were able to do extraordinary things. So the other thing is, very often we set very high goals for ourselves. And when we don't achieve them, our belief in ourselves diminishes. We start to feel that failure it means that I'm not good enough, or I'm just not good for anything. And, you know, for many people, failure is just a part of the process of attaining the goals that they've set for themselves. And I'm sure if you really think about it, failure can be a great asset, actually, because it forces us to go back to the drawing board, to regroup, to reassess, and to start again. So if we set achievable goals for ourselves, even if they're small, it doesn't matter, because when we achieve even a small goal, it gives us that added confidence, faith in ourselves, and we begin to trust that we can actually even attain those higher goals. So that's also very, very essential, is don't become disheartened because you've set your goals too high. Small, bite-sized goals that you can achieve, and they will definitely, slowly but surely, increase that belief in the self. The other thing that we can do to increase that is to surround ourselves with people who are supportive. Now, that can be quite challenging, because in today's world, if you're surrounded by other people who have a poor sense of their own value, then it's very difficult to actually support others and be positive about others, because you yourself are not empowered. But if you can choose the company that you keep, try to keep the company of people who encourage, inspire, and, you know, remind you of your past successes, remind you of your beautiful qualities and the things that people value in you. Now, it's not that other people's opinions are the most important, no, but the support of other people can be extremely helpful. at the end of the day, it's your opinion of yourself. And it's a good exercise to, when you have time, to reflect on your opinion of yourself. And if you find that it is a low opinion, then take time to change that. You know, sometimes we are very hard on ourselves, and the smallest mistake becomes a reason for the inner critic to rear its head. And, you know, part of believing in the self is our ability to forgive ourselves. Forgive ourselves for perhaps some failures, for some mistakes that perhaps we should not have made. And forgiving yourself is a sign that you believe in yourself and that you trust yourself. So often we think a lot about forgiving others, but we don't think about how important it is to forgive ourselves. And sometimes I find that the anger that we project out onto others is, underneath it, is actually anger at ourselves. Anger at ourselves for allowing ourselves perhaps to be manipulated, or allowing ourselves to be deceived in some way. And so we project that anger out against the person, when in fact we're actually angry at ourselves because there's a part of ourselves that feels that we shouldn't have allowed it. So believing in the self is not about being perfect, never making mistakes. You know, if we wait to be perfect, we will never have that belief in the self. Belief in the self means I believe in myself despite the weaknesses I have, my past failures. I am able to see the light of my own success in the future. And, you know, just having that ability to know that whatever it is that you're going through, it is going to pass. If at the moment it feels as if success is just out of reach, to just be able to have that inner dialogue that encourages us to keep going, encourages us not to give up, encourages us not to judge ourselves and put ourselves in a box of, well, you've always failed in the past, and this is just proof again that you are not enough. And sometimes we may have had many knocks in our lives, and it can be quite a challenge to have that belief in the self despite all the so-called failures that we perceive. And it can be failures in our relationships, perhaps in our jobs, perhaps financially. There's so many different areas in life. But what, perhaps this is something to think about. What is success actually? In the world, social media, the way we are kind of taught to understand success is that it's all about position, possessions, power, all these kind of things. But the true success, what we are really looking for in life, is a sense of inner peace. We can call it contentment. It's happiness. I like the word contentment because it includes a sort of quiet sense of happiness and also an acknowledgement of our own goodness. And, you know, if I ask you to make a list of your weaknesses, it's so easy. If I ask you to make a list of your strengths, we sit there trying to think of one or two. But actually, if we spend time and really get to know ourselves, to understand who we are, we will start to find that inner beauty. And we're going to have some meditation in a little while. But I find meditation for me is just the time I give myself to spend with myself. Because how can I know my own greatness, my own beauty, if I'm not spending time to be with myself? We give time to get to know others so that we can work well with them, have a good relationship with them. But what about the self? You know, to believe in the self, we have to know who we are. And there are so many amazing qualities in each one of us. And it's good to aspire to even better qualities. I often say to people, you know, if I ask you what kind of person you would like to be, most of us know very well how we would like to be. But there's a gap between who we are now and who we would like to be. And we try very hard to be that person. But there's a gap there. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. Sometimes we fail to be that person that we truly want to be. So what is missing is actually inner power. We need that inner power so that we can actually live those qualities and those values that we hold dearest to us. And when we don't, we feel disheartened. And that's another aspect of believing in the self. You know, don't feel that you will believe in yourself once you are that perfect person. Life is an adventure. Life is a journey. And we are moving towards being the person that we would like to be. And so, as I said earlier, you know, setting goals. Let's say, for example, you want to stop getting upset or angry. And that might not happen overnight. But if you start to be aware of it, you start to see your triggers, and slowly but surely, with that awareness, you will see the triggers and you will see them coming. And when they come, you will make that right choice because you believe in yourself, you know who you want to be and how you can get there. And it's important for us to learn to let go of the habits that are not good for us, the habits that constantly undermine our belief in ourselves, our trust in ourselves. Trust is a component of self-belief, and it is so important. And I think not enough attention is given to self-trust. Self-trust doesn't come because I don't make any mistakes. Self-trust comes when I understand that I can rely on myself. I am dependable. I will be there for myself. I will not beat myself up and undermine myself. So developing that self-trust is very, very important, because the truth is we cannot trust anyone until we trust ourselves. This was a lesson that I learned. You know, when you doubt yourself, when you're unsure of yourself, it's very difficult then to trust other people. So experiment with this and start to notice when you are distrusting yourself. One of the signs is when you have a decision to make, the first thing you do is you go and ask everyone else what you should do. So where is the self-trust? Where is the belief in yourself? And again, meditation helps me because it clears the space in my mind. And when there's clarity in the mind, it's so much easier to feel confident to make your own decisions. And remember that there is no right and wrong decision. You may make a decision and after some time realize that actually there was a better decision that you could have made, but it is not a failure, it is a learning. So if we can see all these so-called failures as opportunities for learning and opportunities for inner growth, and this keeps the inner world of our mind very, very positive. Because the moment something so-called goes wrong, we'll be able to turn it around and to see the benefit. And just to go back to my experience with cancer for a moment, you know, it was a challenging experience, very difficult. But I can say today that it was the best experience of my life. And I'm sure you've heard that from other people as well. Why? Because it got me to shift. It got me to change. It got me to look at myself and really to bring about those inner changes that I needed to make. The interesting thing is, I needed to make external changes as well as inner changes. Because, for example, environment is very powerful. And I felt that if I stayed in the same environment, I wouldn't be able to bring about the changes at an inner level. And so I had the courage to change my outer environment, which then supported and helped me to change some of the negative patterns that were entrenched, partly because of the environment that I was in. For example, the expectations of others. It can be very powerful. You're trying to bring about inner change within yourself, and others are wanting you to be the way you've always been. And so believing in oneself, having the courage to take those steps that will enable you to have a healthier life at a mental level, a spiritual level, and also at a physical level. So I think I'm going to, perhaps just before we have the meditation, I just want to say something about this. There's something called the imposter syndrome. Maybe you've heard about this, but from what I understand, it's the belief that even when you succeed, you don't deserve it. And it can be a very subtle thing, but it is something to check. Only you will know if it's something that you are doing to yourself. And so even though you may be attaining the kind of life that you want, you're successful, things are going well for you, but at an inner level, you are undermining yourself because you feel that you don't deserve it. So this is another thing that we have to be aware of, that not to sabotage our own happiness, but really to acknowledge who we are, our own value, whether we succeed externally or not, but to believe in the self, because that is what is going to keep us going through the challenges, through the obstacles, and bring us out on the other side. And that will be our success. So let's take a few moments now, sit back, and let's just go inwards and reflect for a few moments on our inner world, which of course is where everything is happening. Let me take a nice deep breath. And as I breathe out, just to relax the body. So we've heard many things in the last half an hour or so. But let me turn my attention towards myself and ask myself, do I believe in my own goodness? Do I believe in my capacity to overcome the challenges, the obstacles that I face? If that old voice emerges, that voice that reminds me that I'm not enough, can I say thanks, but no thanks? I'm finished with you. From today, I will focus on my inner strength, my own potential, to have the kind of life I would like, which means to be the person I would like to be. To be content with myself, even happy with myself. To know that I have the capacity to tolerate, to endure anything that life brings to me. And just by going within and drawing on my own inner power, I can overcome all the challenges. I find I enjoy my own company. I appreciate my ideas, my inspirations, and I hold them as my goals. Each day, I will see the transformation and slowly let go of the patterns within myself that undermine this important belief in myself. I know myself. I trust myself. My failures are my stepping stones. They teach me. They show me a better way, a better path for the future. From today, I will take time to get to know myself and to appreciate everything about me. Thank you.
Thank you, Belinda. It was an excellent talk. It's been inspirational, but it's been filled with tools and tips. Thank you so much for sharing your insights this evening. And I know your meditation this evening is one I'm going to go back and listen to again and again because it just shifted things for me. So thank you very, very much. We now have lots of questions, and I'll say up front, I don't know how many we will be able to cover, but we will do our best. The very first question is, would you share what it was during your illness that enabled you to identify the things you needed to change in your attitude or in your life?
Thank you. Yes, it's interesting when you realize the mortality of your body, which only happens, I think, really when you're faced with a life-threatening situation. And I was able to see, just from my inner reflection, the patterns that were so unhealthy. I'll give you one example. I realized that I spent most of my life taking care of other people. And, you know, society says that's a good thing. Society tells us we shouldn't be selfish or self-absorbed. But what I learned is this thing called balance. That unless you take care of yourself, actually you can't take care of anyone else. Or you can do it only at a superficial level. And I realized that I didn't take care of myself at all. I didn't know my needs. I didn't know physically what I should be doing for myself. And as I said earlier, I felt that if I didn't change those patterns, that the cancer would come back, because I saw the cancer as a messenger and it had come to teach me. And what I felt was the lesson was I had to take care of myself. And in the beginning, it was exclusive. I just took care of myself. I couldn't think of taking care of anyone else. But over a period of time, when I brought that balance, then I was able to do both. I was able to care for the self and to then help others. And I still work on it up until today. I don't always get it right, but those old habits, they kind of hang around, and you have to be vigilant because they can come back so quickly. Because part of the problem is your sense of self comes from doing for other people, at least in my case. And so I realized that, you know, that sense of self has to come from who you are. And if you cannot do for anyone else, are you still happy with yourself? Are you contented with yourself? I hope that's helpful.
That's very interesting, and it leads us into the next question, and it will be asking you to unpick this a little bit more for us. The person is saying that they've studied extensively, have major academic achievements and recognition, and now socially are considered to have a very good career. But they were doing all of this unconsciously, seeking a feeling of fulfillment. But years later, now they're recognizing that actually there is an inner void that hasn't been filled by doing all of these things. How do they now move on from there? There is the void. There is also a numbness, not feeling as if there's purpose. And yet their whole life, their career, their responsibilities are all set. Is there a solution? Or is it just acceptance and move on?
Yes, I think this is a question that many, many people have, because so many have that experience that when they achieve, the happiness they anticipate is not there. And I think it brings us back to the focus on the self, because, you know, we always look externally for happiness, for love, for the things that nourish us, we think that it's going to come from that outer world. And in fact, it comes actually from within. And I think that I would encourage that, turning towards something like meditation, inner reflection, really finding out that if I was to let go of all the external achievements, who am I at my core? Do I like myself? What is important to me? And we'll find that actually the external things are not the most important. The most important are primarily three things: our inner peace, love, and happiness. Most of the things we do is an endeavor to experience these three things. And we go out there to try and fill ourselves. Whereas in fact, these three things are only to be found within the self. And so I would really encourage the person who asked this question to begin an inward journey, because it is very possible that we discover who we are without all the labels and find that inner contentment, that inner peace. And then from that, we are able to give. If we ourselves are not full at that inner level, everything is superficial. We can tick all the boxes, but actually the service we give to others, the help that we can, the encouragement that we can give to others, it has to come from our own inner fullness. And it is very possible to find those inner treasures if we look.
Thank you. There's a few other questions, work related. It's it's both sides of the coin. Someone looking for work in a very competitive field. How do you maintain that moving forward when there's so much rejection and being turned down again and again because there's such intense competition? The other side is when you are in the workplace and you find yourself with colleagues who are very negative about other people and are not supportive, and at the end of the day you're left with you find yourself being left with less belief in yourself. And then on just a third side, because these go similarly together, how do you work when you're constantly, or be with people who constantly compare to you to other people where the other person is much better at what they're doing?
So all three of these questions, they're showing us that we are very vulnerable to the opinions of others, to the opinions of others, and also to whether we are accepted by others or rejected by others. So what I've shared this evening is the inner work that we have to do so that it doesn't matter whether we're accepted or rejected by other people. Our belief in ourselves needs to be very solid. And I shouldn't wait until I feel undermined to start working on myself. Let me start now. Some of the tips that I shared, just to check your dialogue with yourself. Try to keep the company of those who support you. Celebrate your successes. Let's say, for example, you get rejected for a job application. Look at the interview that you had and acknowledge the areas where you did well. Just because you didn't get the job is not the failure. This is the problem. We judge ourselves in a very black and white way. And we forget how many steps lead up to those situations. And, you know, any examination that we pass or fail, what happens before that examination is important. You know, the amount of effort we put in, all the things that we do in order to try and attain something, and really acknowledge those. So I would really suggest that you make a program for yourself to develop that belief in yourself that can be solid, that can withstand either the rejection of others, the criticism of others, the comparison that others make. We are so vulnerable when we allow that external stuff to either inflate us and make us feel good, because if we do that, it's only a matter of time before the criticism will bring us down. So our confidence, our self-respect comes from knowing who we are, appreciating ourselves, and then, you know, if I'm praised, no problem. If I'm criticized, that's the opinion of others. It's not going to rock me. And that's the stage that I really want to attain. And that takes daily practice. Keep gently reinforcing yourself, acknowledging yourself, inspiring yourself. And yeah, I know it's not an easy journey, but it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Belinda, could I ask you one last question? I know we've overrun, but if that's possible.
Yes, sure.
What if you keep making a reoccurring mistake? For example, neglecting your health, and you feel embarrassed and you forgive yourself again and again, but you're just in that cycle. Is it so deep-rooted that you actually need intervention, therapy, etc.? Or is there something that you can do that will shift that?
Well, obviously in my case, I got a big shock, and that helps to shift you. But we don't want to wait until, you know, you have something like a disease or something to wake you up. I do believe that you need to really, really understand how important it is. Let's take, for example, a smoker. He wants to give up smoking. He tries to give up smoking, but the day he gets it, how important it is to his health that he stops that habit, that is the day he will find that inner willpower to actually do it. So I do feel that if you are not making not making the changes that you know you need to make, is because you haven't fully realized how important it is. And you know, my own journey of realizing how important it was because I wanted to live, actually. I wanted to continue living. That was a good motivation. But there are many reasons why we should take care of ourselves. First of all, mental health is absolutely so important, especially in today's world. You know, the challenges are increasing day by day. Life is becoming more stressful. I have to take care of myself mentally. I have to give myself time out and proper relaxation. If I don't, I'm really being foolish. So I say, put yourself at the center of your life. Make you your most important hobby, if you wish, to take care of yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, in all ways. Balance is the key, because and balance begins with me first, actually. And once I've got my balance, then I can start helping others and serving others. Thank you.
Belinda, I'm not the only one walking away enriched this evening. There's so many thank yous. People saying that they really appreciate your honesty, your sharings, and how you've made them feel better about themselves. So thank you for giving us such an enriched evening today. And
thank you very much for inviting me. It's been lovely to be with you all.